key is the right picture. It's a key that makes all of these things more important, more understandable, more applicable. And so we're going to spend some time in. I'm going to tell you, we're not going to rush through these first 4 verses. They're probably going to take 4, 5, 6 weeks, as much as we've spent in the end there of chapter 3. The passage starts out, and we start out with the call. The call is to a worthy walk. But even before we get to the call, there are some things we have to pay attention to. It starts out, and it gives us this idea to begin with. I, therefore, the prisoner of the Lord. And it's very important to Paul. In fact, he said this back in chapter 3. Look at the beginning of chapter 3. For this cause, I, Paul, the prisoner of Jesus Christ. Brother Bill, it is so important for him that the church at Ephesus, that all the saints understand, yes, I might be in Rome, and I might be chained up to a Roman guard. In fact, I am in Rome, and I am chained up, and I am facing all of these things, but Caesar does not have me captive. It is he gives credit to the fact that God's freed me before. He could free me again. I'm here because of his will. And Justin, I'm going to tell you, that is not just a little thing. That changes the way we view our life. But in order for that to be the way we view our life, we've got to go back to chapter 3, Brother Hank, and all that stuff about strengthened in the inner man, where Christ is at home in our hearts, that we understand and are living by love, that we are full with the fullness of God. Because, Justin, without that, without viewing our life that way and that being the walk of our life, we're stuck living in the what ifs. What if I didn't do this? And what if I didn't surrender there? And would it have been this way if, did my sin put me here? Now, Doug, I'm going to tell you, God's big enough to deal with all of that, but my brain's not. However, Paul, this is simple. I've surrendered my life. The will of my life is to follow the leading of the Spirit. And that's led me to Rome. So understand this. I am a prisoner of God, chained right here. I am a prisoner of Christ, chained right here. Now, some people have gone to say, and this is why we're taking the time to point this out, that this is Paul almost saying that I'm a prisoner of Christ, I'm a prisoner of God, to the point that I have no choice. That this is where I am, and I have no choice in the matter. But, Bruce, I think that goes against everything he's just taught us for 3 chapters. Our life is accumulation of our choices. In fact, he's about to beg us, I beseech you to make some choices. This is not him saying, I have no choice in the matter. I'm a prisoner of Christ. I have no choice in the matter. This is, I go through life like this with my head down, and he just keeps kicking me along the way. No, we have choice. We have choice to reject him or accept him. We have choice to stay the walking dead or to be made alive. Our choice is to be in him or to be outside of him. The whole book teaches nothing but choice. This is not, I'm a prisoner, I have no choice. No, I have choice, and I've chosen to surrender, and he's led me here. So don't worry for me, because he's got this. Don't be afraid. Church, my little children, if we were John, that's what this would say. My little children, don't be afraid, because he's the one that's got me here. So he starts out with this picture. Understand, I'm a prisoner of the Lord, not Caesar's. But even before that, he has to get this therefore in there. And you know the old statement, you have to find out what it's there for. Well, Brother Hank, we're not going to find out why it's there for, because that would be all the first 3 chapters. It's Paul, a prisoner of the Lord. Why am I a prisoner of the Lord? Why am I about to take you to this call? Because we've been blessed with all spiritual blessings. We are the in him group. We are this group that are no longer dead. We're the group that's been made alive. We're the group that's been strengthened in the inner man. We're the group where Christ is at home in our hearts. We're the group that understand and are living in love. We're the group of people who are walking in all the fullness of God. That's the therefore. Understand the therefore, because that's who we are. Therefore, because of all of those things, he now gets us to this. I ask you, I call, I beg, I plead. Walk worthy of the vocation wherewith you are called. Justin, just do your job. He's doing all of these things. I beg with you. I beseech you. And that's very important too. The first thing when we start to look at this call, Bruce, I know you think I never give you an outline, so here, you ready? Got 2 points. The call, the characteristics. That's only 2 things you're going to get. Don't forget it. You know how far we're going to get in the characteristics? It's like the intro before we get there. But we'll do it. When we start to take a look at this call to the worthy walk, even before we jump in there, Bill, the first thing that it just grabs my attention is the atmosphere or the attitude of this call. I mean, Paul starts out, the prisoner of the Lord beseech you. Now, that's one of those words. It's one of those Greek words that's got a preposition in front of it and then the verb. You put the two together. Anytime you put the preposition and the verb together, it intensifies the verb. Well, the verb means to ask. And so this is like to really ask, to really pursue, to really beg, to entreat, to beseech. And so he starts out in this very picture, and he is begging us, Justin, he's begging us to be worthy. Now, that is just such a different picture sometimes from the way I want to hand it out. Okay, it's not command, there's respect there. You know whose choice it is? We just got done talking about, Paul has a choice. He's not saying there is no choice. You know whose choice it is, whether you walk worthy or not? It's yours. You have a choice. There is respect there given. And if we would treat each other a little bit more that way, Doug, it puts people on the spot if I treat you with respect. Yeah. I hate to admit this, but this is true. You know what happens if you like power over me? Go ahead and put your thumb on me and start pressing down. You want to know what I'm going to do with everything that's inside of me? I'm going to push against that thumb. Now, you can accomplish a whole lot more with me, treating me with respect and bringing to the place of asking. There's not going to be the resistance. There's going to be thought. And I want you to see how Paul deals with them. In fact, this isn't the only place he deals with them. We'll go back, Romans chapter 12. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable, and blah, 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 blah. I'm begging you. If you really want to tie these together, Justin, go and look at that sometime. Not right now, but go look at that sometime. You know what you'll see in verse 3? Verse 3 says that we need to be humble. And then verse 5 and 7 talks about the unity. And then verse 9 and 10 talk about that you walk in love. You know what we're going to see right here? You know what happens after verse 3, verse 4? It talks about unity. You know how this chapter closes out? Talking about loving one another. You know how chapter 5 starts out? I'm telling you, this really is the key. It links them all together. But he begins, and he's starting this way. And Paul is not above begging. In fact, when we were in Galatians, which would be a year ago, in Galatians chapter 4, I think it's verse 18, 19, Paul talks about, I'm in labor pains for you. I'm having labor pains for you until you start living out the fullness of Christ. I'm in pain. Now, Bill, try to cross-reference that with, today's passive indifference. Well, I threw it out there. It's up to them. It's easy to get that way, right? In fact, there's something that kind of protects us from getting that way. Because, Brother Moore, if I actually care, if it matters to me, the response, it's the old, you know how hard it is to be a good lover? Good lovers hurt the most. Now we're going to go back to where we spent that time in chapter 3. You know why it's so important that we get the engine started first? Because, Bill, if I'm not strengthened in the inner man, if Christ is not at home in me, if I'm not living out life in the love of the Lord, the love of Christ, I'll throw this stuff out there in cold and indifference. It's up to you. You're a grown man. Do with it what you want to. That is not the picture we get from Paul. Justin, I'm begging you. Walk worthy of the vocation wherewith you are called. That is a totally different attitude that brings a total different response. I'll listen to somebody I think cares about me that much. They'll get my attention. Why is it so important? Why is it so important to walk worthy? Well, again, this is the therefore, so we have to go back and look at it a little bit. Because until we walk worthy, Brother Maury, we're not living in the power that's in us. Power's in us, but we're not living out that power. We're settling. We're not the walking dead. We're not the zombies anymore, but we're living life just like we are. We're definitely not in the abundant life. And if we're not walking and living out the power that is within us, who are we? We're the church. They'll understand if we're not walking in the power that's within us, then the church is not functioning in full strength. And if the church isn't functioning in full strength, its purpose for the world to see Jesus is weakened. I read this article yesterday. I wasn't looking for it either. I was just going through Yahoo News, which is usually depressing. So I just flip. For Brother Moyer, I saw an article about the religious vote in America, and it says this: 30 years ago, 90% of Americans would have said that they were religious. Now, notice it says religious; it doesn't say Christian. 90% would say they were religious. 7 years ago, that was 65%. And they estimate today, if they did that survey, it would be less than 50%. Hence, the voting bloc is less than half of the United States. But Justin, I just got to do this. Why? Why does it seem like we're going backwards? We should not be going backwards. Not in the power that's within us. Not when we have things like, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men. So we have to take a look and say, like the book of Galatians, have we twisted that somehow? Is I beg you. Brother Bill, if we will walk worthy, we can't lose. We can't lose. It's like, go march around Jericho 7 times. Blow your trumpets and yell. You can't lose. That's the life we should live. But if we don't, we're not strengthening the inner man. Christ is not at home on the inside. We're not living out the love of God. Justin, we can't make those things happen ourselves. It's the love of Christ. We live out the love of Christ. Now, the problem, that doesn't just affect us. It affects our home. It affects our neighbors. It affects our nation. It affects the world. It weakens the body. Body too. Christ is gone. The church is body too. Purpose, represent God on earth. Well, what are we showing? Paul says, this is important enough, so I beg you, walk worthy. I beg you. Now, if you really tie this to like some conclusion, Matt, the conclusion is this, that I, by my decisions, can limit the glory of God. I can limit it in my life. I can limit it in the church. I can limit it in the world. That is crazy to think that he gives me that choice. Almost as crazy as to say that he loves me with everything that he is because he is love, but he will allow me to choose to go to hell and live in separation from him. Our God is a God of choice. Which again, just throw this out there. Hank, when we start going into other quote-unquote theologies that take away choice, it just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the God he is in every other aspect. So Paul says, I beg you, I beseech you, walk worthy. And that gets us to the very next verse. We told you, word, we haven't gotten very far. Walk. Walk is symbolic of our daily conduct. It's been this way through the entire book so far. It is a continuing action. The minute you stop moving a leg, you've stopped walking. You're not walking anymore, you're standing. Walk is our daily conduct. It's continuous. It's the idea of walking is crucial to the rest of this entire book. And I'm just going to spit this out because we're going to spend time going through it. But right here, we're talking about the worthy walk. Right after the worthy walk in chapter 4, we see a walk of unity. Right after the walk of unity, we get to chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, and it leads us into a walk of love. You go down to verse 8 of chapter 5, it's a walk of light. You go a little bit further, 15, 16, you're talking about a walk of wisdom. And you end this chapter and go into chapter 6, and you're talking about a spirit-filled walk. And then you close the book out with a walk of warfare. This entire book from here on, that's why there is a change when you get to 4:1. Okay, now that your engine is running, which is why we spent so much time at the end of chapter 3. Justin, now that your engine is running, we're going to talk about how you drive it. We're going to tell you about where you go. Okay, driver's ed 101. It's running, you got the key turned on, seatbelts on, let's figure out how to run it. And it is walk, 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 walk. Now, that's this picture of the worthy walk. Bill, that means I got to go to worthy. See, I haven't got very far. What does it mean to be worthy? Well, worthy is a word that comes from a meaning that talks about equalizing the scales. So this is simple, walk worthy. I got to equalize the scales. I got to walk in a way of a manner, an attitude of life that, Brother Moyer, fits who I am. No, we just spent 3 chapters talking about who we are. I am the one who's in possession of the Spirit. I'm sealed by the Spirit, and I'm led by the Spirit. I'm the one whom which Christ is at home in. I'm the one who's full of the Father. I'm the one who's the habitation of God. There you go. Walk worthy of that. Well, if I had to pull that off, I'd be... Which goes again, but remember for like 5 weeks, every week we said, you're not going to be able to do chapter 4 unless we pay attention and get the engine started, and that starts with yield. Yield to the Spirit. Because that's just overwhelming. Live like it. May our practice be like it. We're supposed to, our life is to be in harmony with our position, and our position is in Him. So, Lorraine, here's the big question. What does that look like? How do we do it? What does it look like? And as soon as we start to talk about what does it look like to have a worthy walk? And I got to tell you, there's something inside of me that right here, if I'm not careful, the grace of God and the leading of the Spirit and in Him just start to get pushed away, and striving begins to take over. And in my mind, very much because of the way I grew up, there's this big list of things I must complete. If I'm not careful, if we don't spend enough time in chapter 3, Brother Bill, I get right here and walk the worthy walk. Okay, Brother Jeremy, what's the worthy walk? And it begins to be this list of things I must do and this list of things I must not do. And that becomes my focus. And I believe many people have replaced the worthy walk with meaningless externals. Now I said meaningless, not right or wrong. Because, Doug, lots of times these externals, they're right. They're moral. But when they become the focus, they're meaningless. Okay, we're going to, hopefully, read some verses out of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, those are some pretty tough verses for the Israelites to hear. Bruce, you know what they say? They say, I don't want to hear your prayer anymore. They say, I don't want your sacrifices anymore. They say, why are you coming to sanctuary? Those are all good things, aren't they? But when all that matters is the externals, when you focus on the externals, chapter 3 did not start. You start your engine by focusing on the externals. In fact, it started. What's the first thing you have to do? Strengthen yourself in the inner man by the Spirit. It starts on the inside. Just flip this over to Romans chapter 12, by the way. See the correlation? Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformed on the inside. It's from the inside out. It's not the externals. No. I believe we have focused so hard on the externals as a fence to protect. Because I think this is well-meaning. But when you focus on the externals and the externals become the point, it becomes meaningless. But if we went to lunch and we started talking about, what makes a good Christian? Describe one. I'm afraid you would probably get this right. I know you're speaking tonight, so remember that. You would probably get this right, but somewhere I would roll into, at some point it's about the things they do, and it's about the things they don't do, and then you would start to correct me. Well, that just reveals the inside, and we'd have this lovely discussion, and somewhere we'd forget the idea of hypocrisy and putting on an outside face. And, I'd probably say, well, all right, if we're going to talk about a good Christian, let's do this. It's a person who goes to church every time the doors are open. That's a good sign that they're a good Christian. Sounds good, right? I can make this sound spiritual. But I'm just going to tell you, there's about 10 million people today who are in church. They're Catholic, they're Mormons, they're Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're going to go every time the doors are open. In fact, we could actually throw in some Christians. They're here, but they're here because it's on the list and it needs a check mark. Not because they're focused on the internals and they love the Father. Their value has moved to where they love the check mark. And Brother Moyer, I'm going to tell you, when you start to challenge, thank you, when you start to challenge somebody's value, they'll fight tooth and nail. Now, you've been a Christian a long time. You stop and think of some of the things we fought about. We fight about this song, and we fight about drums, and we fight about screens, and hymnals, and carpet, and chairs, and pews, and pulpits, and strength in the inner man. Well, somewhere in there, where is unity of the brother? Endeavoring for the unity. This is where I always get in trouble. This is where like people say, okay, so, there's all these good things. We don't drink and we don't smoke and we don't cuss and we get our hair cut and we don't look at this way and, and it used to be in the old days. We don't go to movies and we don't ever swim and we don't. So we have this whole list of saying, are you saying those things are okay? Justin, here's the truth. I don't even want to answer that question. No, I'm not saying they're okay. This is what I'm saying. I'm saying if you give me some person who has surrendered to Christ in their inner man, or someone where Christ is at home, someone whose life shows a commitment to others, someone who is living out the fullness of God, I am not worried about their decisions when it comes to drinking or movies or vocabulary. I'm telling you, it's a change on the inside, and we can polish the outside all we want to. In Galatians, where it gives us the fruit of the Spirit, Brother Bill, it ends, against such there is no law. Well, that's what happens, when we are not walking in the leading of the Spirit, when Christ isn't at home, we need fences, and we're going to make a mess out of life. But when we are, we don't need all those fences. There's no law needed when we're living in love, joy, peace, gentleness, meekness, goodness, faith, temperance. Those things, okay, they're going to lead me just fine. When I'm surrendered, the Spirit doesn't need the help. But if we're not careful, we'll take the fences and think we don't need the Spirit. Brother Drew said this Sunday night. He made a statement. I forget exactly what he said. I should have looked it up because it'd been fun to mock him word for word. Got to have fun. But he looked over at the preacher and says, there's a reason why a lot of our youth aren't continuing in church, why we're losing them. And that's because parents are going home and having barbecued preacher or something like that. Remember that now? Okay, I'm going to tell you, there's some truth to that. Okay, if you tear down authority, there's some truth to that. Okay, and there's a perfect illustration in our country right now with the whole rise of BLM, and then we made police abusers. You know what? I'm not going to surrender to abuser. I just got done telling you, if I think you're the abuser, I'm pushing on that thumb with everything that I have. And even if I get crushed, I'd rather fight against abuse and tyranny than surrender to it. It's the American way. So when we made the police bad, guess what's happened in those cities? It's not a shock. It's not a shocker. Okay, that's what's going to happen. And so I agree with Brother Drew. Let me tell you, you start tearing down the authority in the church. I'll also go this far. That's why we need to be very careful who we give authority to. Okay? And we need to be careful how we respond when we have a position. So I believe there's truth to that. But I believe he's wrong in one aspect. And that because he made it sound as if that is the great reason why we're losing our youth. And I don't think that's true. I think the great reason why we're losing our youth is because we've replaced surrender to the Spirit with a list. Because Kids have grown up where Christianity is defined by the do's and the don'ts, and that's where their value is. And the do's and the don'ts, they're right and they're moral. And so they are growing up not going to movies and not drinking but they're growing up in homes that are full of bitterness and slander and malice and wrath and lack of love. And Brother Bill, then that ends up just being hypocrisy. And I'm going to tell you one thing kids can see every single time they smell it. Kids can tell hypocrisy. And they're growing up in a place where they have all the externals, but weak inner man. Justin, what about restoring in meekness, considering thyself? Well, instead of restoring in meekness, considering thyself, they're driving home hearing, I would never act like Brother Wayne. I would never say that. Considering thyself in the spirit of meekness, well, that one's out. How about endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit? Yeah, I talked to Brother Moyer because, he needs it every once in a while, but that man, we take his blessings and we make idols of them. How about a spirit of forgiving? I have a level. I have a thing. Justin, I'll be the most forgiving person in the whole wide world until you do this thing. Pick whatever thing it is. I don't care. You pick this thing, and then I'm done with you. Right? Now, you know why we do that. Because this thing causes destruction, and I'm putting up a fence. I just really want to protect you from this thing. But all I did is destroy the whole way of Christ because I now start changing it and twisting it and putting levels on it. Bill's gone too far. He's past my forgiveness. You deal with him. It's more your nature. I guess we have a different Christ living on the inside. Kids see hypocrisy, and they go and they look for something real. And they're going to a place that's full of dead fruit, looking for real. And that's very sad. Eric, did I give you Isaiah chapter 1? Hear the word of the Lord, ye rulers of Sodom. Give ear unto the law of our God, ye people of Gomorrah. He's not being very nice to him right there. To what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices unto me? Bill, I want you to see, they're doing it. They're still doing it. The why matters. The why we do it matters. To what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices unto me, saith the Lord? I am full of the burnt offering of rams and the fat of fed beasts, and I delight not in the blood of bullocks or of lambs or of he-goats. When ye come to appear before me, who hath required this at your hand to tread my courts? They're going to church. They're sacrificing. They're following the code. He says, why? And who told you? They'll be like, well, didn't you? Bring no more vain oblations. I told you they're worthless. Lord, you know how sad that is? Incense is an abomination unto me, the new moons and Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies, I cannot away with. It is iniquity, even the solemn meeting. And we can go on and on. You can go to chapter 2, you can go to chapter 3. Justin, why matters? Chapter 3, ready for this great thing? You've heard it from me lots of times. Chapter 3 comes before chapter 4. We have to live with our engine already running, or will we place reality? Now, oh, wait a minute. I got 7 minutes. We'll jump into the beginning of the next. So we have the call. Now we have the characteristics. Characteristics. What does it look like? Well, it doesn't look like usually what we call it. With all lowliness and meekness, with long-suffering, forbearing one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. What does it look like? Well, it begins with lowliness. It begins with humility. And Justin, that just cracks me up. Why? Well, look what he just did for 3 chapters. For 3 chapters, let me tell you who you are. You were thought of before creation. You're seated with him in the heavenlies. You're full of the fullness of God. You have this power inside of you. You're the habitation of the very Lord. Let me tell you who you are. Now walk in lowliness. Now walk in humility. Because we read all that, and it's like, I need to let people know who I am. I'm chosen of him. Well, I'm going to tell you, that was Israel's problem. They had that part down. I'm chosen of him, so nothing's going to happen. I'm chosen of him, so I'll always win. I'm chosen of him, so there'll be no challenge, there'll be no chastisement, there'll be no problem, I'll always win. Bill, makes me wonder every time I said, and the gates of hell shall not prevent against it. I hope I didn't misuse that. Because, I believe that. I believe there should have been no Assyrians and no Babylonians and no Chaldeans. I believe they never should have been in that city. You know why they were in that city? Because the pride of those men. It starts right here and says, yes, this is who you are, and you need to walk worthy of who you are. But that worthiness begins with a humility, with a lowliness. Furthermore, we are to be the representation of God in this world. But you know why? Because God dwells within us. It's the power of God. It's God's plan. It's God's spirit. It's God's leading. It's God's ways. His ways don't even make sense to us. We wouldn't come up with them on our own. We wouldn't be able to follow them on our own. That's why we glorify God, because it's all God. We have the tough job. Surrender. Step aside and follow. It begins with this picture of humility. Bill, we're going to have to go out to lunch again. What's it look to be humbled? Because here's where we get it, Humility. We would wax wise and come up with all these nice words for humility. I would top you. See, humility. So I'm going to go this way. To be humbled. Okay, because we'll get a better picture that way. We'll be more honest with what we think humility means. Justin, if we said Bill was humbled, then we would come up with things like, well, he was embarrassed. Or he fell on his face with that one. He popped off to Brother Jeremy and he really put him in his place. Look stupid, feel small. I was trying to come up with a picture illustration. So this is the one I came up with, Matt. It's Back to the Future. We think a humble person, well, that's like McFly. Just a worm. Because that's our picture. This idea that humility matters. And then you add to that the fact that our society exalts pride on every step. Justin, I just got this email from my HR department last week talking about how we need to find ways to create more certificates to pat people on the back. I need to tell them that they're great for doing what we pay them for. Well, sometimes they go above and beyond. Let's see. Their job is to represent the person whose name is on the check well. Go above that. Well, their job description, you want me to write up their job description? Represent this name well. Always. Done. But we just love to pat people on the back. You know, when they're kids, we give them a trophy for every little thing under the sun. Oh, no, I'm going to say this too. Here, Ben, here's why, people aren't going to like this. But I don't like watching it. Okay. I've been in and out of churches since I was 4 years old. Do you want to know how many times I've seen strong members in the church fight, throw a fit, go at each other because their kid didn't get the award? No, you've been in school long enough. You've seen this. I've got lots of good memories from my boys, Brooch. I really do. I'm so thankful for my boys. Lord, I'm thankful for what you've done in the hearts of my boys. And I'm thankful for the young ladies that you gave them. But I tell you, one of my favorite memories is when Eric got the trophy for Athlete of the Year or some stupid thing like that. I understand why you have to do them, Doug, so don't get me wrong. But now you know what I really think about him. And he came to me and said, Dad, this other kid, he worked really hard. This was easy for me. I want to give it to him. What do you want me to do? Well, you're coach, you give it to him. No, you go up there and you give it to him. We build this level of pride. I'm not talking about the parents who you have to call in and have conferences. I'm talking about people who are on the staff who want to have a knockdown throwout because their kid didn't get the award. Well, it's a perfect opportunity to teach them that award is not life. That walking humbly in the Spirit, loving others, is much more valuable. All right, we're out of time. Which brings us right where we need to be. I don't know what I put all these pages out here for. Because next week we're going to start to take a look at humility. Now, I wish I could have got through some of this. The absence of humility is pride. It's much better. It's a much easier picture to jump into humility after you've looked at what it's not. So I don't know where we go next week, but that's where we're going to start as we go down this challenge, this call for us to walk the worthy walk. Everybody close in a word of prayer.